Hey, thanks for clicking on the video. Today we're taking a look at one of the newest hunter builds. One that leverages some of the massive buffs that just went live with the mid-episode patch. Strand hunters were always pretty good, and with some slight tweaks, we can now have near permanent woven mail, infinite melees, and become a super powered tangle factory for really good ad clear and damage. So if you've been looking for a truly new hunter build, then go no further. But now, before we break it down, in usual YouTuber fashion, if you enjoy my content, you've seen my channel before, you're a returning viewer, but you haven't decided to subscribe yet, I personally think you should. I do my best to put out informative and entertaining Destiny 2 content, and it's free for you, but it helps me out a ton if you do subscribe. Also, if you are one of my community members, first off, thank you, but if you wanted to engage with me and others further, I do have a Discord server linked down below in the description that I am trying to grow. Now, with that stuff aside, actually diving into the build, let's start with our exotic armor piece. Today, that will be the newest hunter exotic, Moirai. If you don't know what this exotic does, well, I don't blame you. It reads, Threaded Spike can bounce to tangles, detonating them and returning immediately. Tangles detonated by Threaded Spike are rewoven and retrieved by it. Catches without a tangle refund extra melee energy. In-game, we can look at this exotic in action. The first and easiest thing to demonstrate is that our Threaded Spike will now bounce off of tangles. As you should know, tangles spawn when we defeat any Strand debuffed enemy. In this case, we can grapple melee an enemy and get a tangle to spawn. Now, if we throw our Threaded Spike at any nearby enemies or the tangle itself, it will bounce off of that tangle and detonate it, coming straight back to us. Now, you'll notice nothing really happened, but that's because this exotic fails to mention that you need to actually catch our melee, which is done by meleeing again when the actual Threaded Spike is close to us. So if we redo the test, but instead catch our spike this time, we will immediately be given a tangle out of thin air. Basically, this exotic armor piece duplicates tangles. And this is an incredibly powerful ability, which we will be abusing in this build. As for the second part of this exotic chess piece, when we throw our Threaded Spike without hitting a tangle, we will get massively increased melee refund when catching that spike. Without the exotic, for example, hitting 2 enemies will give us like 60% of our melee. Then, when we have a Moirai equipped, those same 2 enemies now become like 95%. So, this exotic both duplicates tangles and allows us to spam our melee even more than we already could. Now then, coming out of our exotic armor piece, this is usually where I talk about an exotic weapon, but there has been a trend with my recent builds, and that's that they don't need an exotic weapon. In my mind, a build that does not restrict what weapons you can use is generally going to be the better one, as you can cater your weapons to any activity in the entire game. So, since there isn't anything to talk about here yet, we can jump straight into our Strand subclass. Moving left to right, of course, our super does need to be Silk Strike, but that's not a bad thing. Silk Strike is a roaming super with one of the shortest cooldowns, and it's actually very strong. You can use this super for mobility, ad clear, or even boss and large health bar enemy damage. On from our super, we have our class ability, which will be a Gambler's Dodge for the melee refund. Then next, we have our melee, which is again. Then next, we have our melee, which is, of course, Threaded Spike. If you guys don't know how broken this melee is, well, it does really good damage. It hits way more enemies than you think it probably should, and everything that it hits that doesn't die immediately will become severed, which, if you don't recall, reduces enemies' outgoing damage by 40%. So yeah, this melee is pretty good and it's nice to have. And then after that, we have our grenade, which is going to be Shackle Grenade. Just kidding. I actually don't even have this unlocked yet. We're using Grapple. And in my opinion, if you have the option to use Grapple and you're not, you don't know what fun is. But moving on from our abilities, we have our first aspect, which is going to be Whirling Maelstrom. This aspect states that any tangles that we destroy will become a spinning death ball of sorts. You can see this happening in-game as we spawn a tangle by getting a grapple melee kill. And then when we destroy that by either shooting it or throwing it, it will detonate like normal, but rather than just disappearing, it will turn into this seeking Beyblade. This is going to last quite a while and does pretty good damage while also unraveling things when it does score a kill. This ability, this aspect, is going to be one of our better sources of ad clear in this build, as we should have multiple of these up at all times, thanks to Moirai duplicating tangles. But now, back in the subclass, the next aspect we have is Ensnaring Slam. This aspect says that we can use our air move to consume our class ability, which will slam us into the ground and suspend anything nearby. And thanks to the most recent patch, Suspending enemies will now also grant us woven mail. So taking a look at that, we do this cool backflip and then hit the ground to suspend enemies. And if we take a look at our buffs, we can see that we get woven mail for 12 seconds. What's going on behind the scenes is that for each suspended enemy, we get 4 seconds. So if you use this ability on a group of adds, you will easily have a ton of woven mail uptime. Also, the ensnaring slam will still activate our underlying dodge. As we can see, we get a full melee charge when we actually hit the ground. But to make our class ability easily spammable for this build, we need to look at our fragments. So for those fragments, the main one for class ability spamability is Thread of Mind. This fragment will give us chunks of class ability back whenever we defeat suspended enemies. So since our class ability suspends, this is a nice little loop. After that, we have Thread of Fury. This fragment will return a ton of melee energy when we deal damage with a tangle. Unfortunately, Whirling Maelstrom itself, the Beyblade, does not count for this, but the initial detonation still does, and the energy we get here is a lot. And after that, we have some more bonus effects. We have Thread of Generation, which will give us some grenade energy whenever we deal any damage at all. This is nice to do more grapples. And then lastly, we have Thread of Continuity. This will make our strand debuffs last longer, which means enemies are severed for longer and suspended for longer. Now coming out our subclass, the next thing to talk about is weapons. For this build, like I said earlier, you can use whatever, but this build is in fact uplifted by using some type of strand weapon. Of course, it comes as no surprise that I recommend using Mint Retrograde, but you could even use exotics like the Navigator, Final Warning, or even Quicksilver Storm. You can also use weapons like Imminence that have access to Strategist. That way you never have to worry about your class ability cooldown, as that perk refunds class ability on kills. As for your energy and heavy slots, we will be relying on orbs for healing this build, so if you don't like doing that, then I would recommend some type of weapon with heal clip. As for our heavy, just cater it to your activity, or be like me and always use an eager edge sword. Now moving on, our next topic is armor. The stats we want for this build are 100 melee and 100 class. My hunter stats are abysmal, so I couldn't really get anything over 100 in a stat, but if possible, you can either go close to 200 melee for increased damage, or even 200 class for the overshield when you do your suspending slam. Again, assuming you actually play hunter a lot, then your stats should look way better than this, and you can invest a lot more into either of those. But then secondary stats for this build are super, so we can spam that ability, and then weapons, health, and grenade are pretty whatever. Also, we don't need a specific armor set bonus. Now moving on, we have our armor mods. Starting in the helmet, this build uses ammo finders and siphons. Make sure a siphon matches your most used weapon. Then on the arms, we run a focusing strike, so we get some class ability back on melee damage, a bolstering detonation, so that we get even more class ability back on grenade damage, and then a heavy-handed, so our melee kills, be it from threaded spike or grapple, spawn orbs. And then on the chest piece, we run my favorite combo of an ammo generation and resistances. Then for the legs, we run a double recuperation, so that we get a ton of health on orb pickup, and an absolution, so that we get a small chunk of all of our abilities whenever we pick up an orb too. And lastly, on our class item, we have a special finisher to make ammo on command, a powerful attraction, so that whenever we do our suspending slam or a normal dodge, we pick up nearby orbs, and a reaper, so that after doing the slam, our next kill will make an orb no matter what. Now, our final topic before we display the gameplay loop, we have the artifact. The first perk we leverage is Tightly Woven. This perk gives us plus 20 stats to our grenade and class whenever we have woven mail. This is a nice, easy effect that we can benefit from. After that, we have Threadling Proliferation. This perk will cause our strand weapons to spawn threadlings through sustained damage or by getting kills. You can then pair this with Pack Tactics to get a bit of increased damage from our threadlings. And then after this, we have Threaded Blast. This perk will cause tangles that are destroyed by our strand weapons to deal double damage in a greater radius. Granted, we should be meleeing our tangles more often than not, so you might not need to run this. And then after that, we have Tangled Web in the final column. This perk will be another source of suspension, as whenever we make a tangle, it will suspend things around it. It's really not too crazy, but it is nice, and it helps a lot to ensure that we have a dodge ready, thanks to our Fragments refunding class ability on suspended kills. And then lastly, we have Shield Crush. This perk will increase our melee damage and regen whenever we have Woven Mail. This is a 25% increase to our Threaded Spike damage and a 12% increase to our grapple damage. Now for the gameplay loop, it's actually pretty simple. At first, I was trying to use this build as a very complex, throw multiple Threaded Spikes at a time setup, but I found myself dropping the loot too often. I wasn't surviving very well, but then I changed it up and actually kind of fell in love. This build should be focused on duplicating tangles first and foremost, and then spamming your suspending slam. The best way to start engagements is by focusing on getting a suspending slam off, but optionally you can throw your threaded spike to sever enemies first. Once you suspended a group of enemies, your threaded spike will be refunded, and you should have a good amount of time with woven mail. You'll then want to kill one of the enemies that you just suspended with either your weapons or even a grapple melee. When it dies, it will spawn a tangle, which you will then use your threaded spike on and make sure you catch it. Doing so will spawn a whirling maelstrom that will start to clear the rest of the suspended enemies, which will be refunding your class ability with each kill. At the same time, Moirai duplicated that tangle, allowing you to either throw the tangle at the same group of enemies if they're tanky, or you can throw it elsewhere to spread around the ad clear with those tangle detonations, refunding melee energy. By the end of this combo, you should have all of your abilities back, which you can then repeat the loop. Throw your threaded spike, suspend some enemies, which refunds threaded spike, kill one of those enemies to spawn a tangle, use your threaded spike on it to duplicate it, and let the whirling maelstroms go to town. With each suspending slam you do, you should be picking up orbs, which will be regenerating your health, and you should be doing it often enough that you never run out of woven mail. The main way to think of this build is that your threaded spike is a tangle duper. I would only try to use your threaded spike for damage if you are about to slam, because that refunds it. As usual, though, eventually you'll get in a bad spot or come up against some champions or even drop the loop accidentally, which you can then super to get all of your abilities back on top of Silk Strike's strong, clear, and damage. And I think that's it. This build is really fun, it's really green, and there's a lot going on, which makes it very engaging, and it's kind of just creative in a world of mostly boring builds. But thank you for getting this far into the video. Your viewership means an absolute ton. Again, if you are watching to the end and you haven't joined my Discord, I would love to see you there, or if somehow you're listening to me yap and you're not subscribed, I would really appreciate a subscription. But now for my usual ending. If you want to support me, support the channel, a like, a comment, a subscription goes a very long way. If you want to support me and support the channel but you can't think of a comment down below, Beyblade. With that, as usual, I hope you are having a great day, and I hope to see you around.